get this to work, but I'm struggling very hard to try to get this thing to work. So anyway, we're just going to talk about Gila Bend. I went out to Gila Bend in June on a survey, an archaeological survey. I'm able to use it as my field trip, so I'm going to give you guys an explanation of where I went. So to start with, this is the Basin and Range. This is a small section of the Basin and Range, highlighting specifically south of Gila Bend, Arizona, towards Mexico, which is down here. And we went down off of US 89 to get to our survey area. I can't indicate where, but this area was, in fact, part of the topography and geology of this particular survey. So to give you some background, the basin and range were created from divergent tectonic plate stretching. So the Pacific plate subducts underneath the North American plate, which causes the North American plate to uplift and go over the actual the Pacific plate goes underneath and it pushes the North American plate up. And because of this, about 17 million years ago, this process started, and of course it's forcing the North American plate to stretch. But because the Pacific plate is subducting, water is being squeezed out of the plate, which is of course it's more buoyant than the rocks around it, so it's actually rising through the mountain or through the crust, and it's causing the rocks to melt because it's reducing the melting point of the rocks around that water, which of course causes magma to be created. It creates a magma pocket, and that particular magma chamber is now pushing up against the underside of the North American plate. So it causes this ridge, it's basically this rounded surface, and it's forcing that magma up as the plate is moving over it. And as that stretch continues and that pressure from the magma pushes up, it causes normal faults in the surface of the earth. And we see the hanging wall drop below the footwall. And that drop in elevation is what creates our ridges up here and our valleys down here. So what's interesting about this is this photograph is a picture I took of the basalt mountains that are going through Black Gap. And what was interesting is you see on one side that the gradient for this particular mountain is very steep, but on the opposite side it's very smooth and shallow. And the reason for that is when that tectonic plate cracked, when we see that crack in that normal fault, that's on the leeward side of the mountain, on this side, where it drops down and it creates a very steep gradient. The back side of the mountain here, this is due to erosion, and the wind blows over those ridges and smooths out the gradient where it doesn't actually do that. You can even imagine the wind coming and cascading directly over this area here and not touching the lower slope, which creates a very steep slope on one side and a very smooth gradient on the other. Now, what creates the area, the mountains themselves, of course, is magma, which becomes lava when it reaches the Earth's surface. And this comes out and cools as basalt. These basalt flats are all over the area, and they're all situated in a north-south pattern, which of course is indicative of how that plate is being stretched. It splits in a linear fashion north to south. And the lava itself is not the Pohoi lava, which is very crumbly and cracked. This is A'a lava, which is very smooth and very shallow, and it oozes out over the landscape and creates these huge basalt lakes that are all over the ridges and some in the valleys. And it's really impressive because the weathering, you can actually see the erosion created from the water inside of these basalt flats. You can see them as they go across the landscape. So the wind, of course, goes over the backside of the mountain The water comes down the front side, and the water's velocity will actually force a lot of the sediments and erosion to occur more steeply and more harshly on the front side of the mountain than the wind on the back. So we get into the valleys. So the valleys, all of this material falls into the valleys themselves and becomes sediment and sand and silt. And it layers the valley floors. And some of these layers are up to a meter thick, so you step right through it. Of course, it's a beautiful place for land animals such as rabbits and mice, snakes and lizards. All kinds of different animals live in this particular substrate. But the area we went to is government property, so you would need a permit to visit it. However, you can obtain permits for recreational use, and I've included some website addresses inside of the report that's going to follow this, or at least it's inside of the system. You can look at there. But the best place to go visit would be the Saguaro National Monument, which is only about 15 miles to the east of this area. And they have hundreds of miles of hiking trails, they have bicycle trails, they even have off-roading trails that you can go and take your vehicle on. If your vehicle has a high clearance, you should be able to get to them. There is a camping available there. There's also in designated areas for camping as well as off-grid camping. So you can do both in the monument. There's also horse riding trails and backpacking trails that you can traverse as well.